Hello everyone, this will be Chapter 4 of Danny and the Phantom, written and read by Insect Overlord. This chapter is titled, The Heart Distorts the Soul, and has content warnings for gore, medication misuse, and health problems. Maddie hummed as she fried up some eggs and sausage for breakfast. It was a special occasion, Danny's first day of high school. She and Jack had been hesitant to let him go, especially with his seizure a few days prior, but he was cleared by his doctor. He was allowed so long as he didn't participate in any strenuous activity. She heard some muffled footsteps, and her son appeared in the kitchen doorway, rubbing his eyes with the palm of his hand. "Mom, what are you doing?" He blinked at her blearily. "Making breakfast, of course," she answered. She thought the smell would have tipped him off. High school is a big deal. You're growing up. You need lots of nutrients if you want to get taller. He furrowed his brow at her, and Maddie frowned. She expected at least a pout at her mention of his height. He had dark circles under his eyes and was leaning against the wall heavily. She placed her hand on his forehead, but he didn't have a fever. If anything, his skin felt cool. "Why don't you go sit down, honey? I'll get you your medication." He was probably just in pain. He was due for another dose a half hour ago, but Maddie hadn't wanted to wake him up. She grabbed his prescription bottles of morphine and flecainide and took a pill from each, handing them to Danny with a glass of water. Maddie watched him as he took the pills, wringing her hands. He really didn't look good. As she watched him sit there, she imagined him going to school and having another seizure. Maybe the staff wouldn't know what to do. Maybe the EMT would come too late. Maybe he would die, and this time he wouldn't come back. She bit her lip and looked away. She would feel a lot better if he stayed home today, but she knew this was a big deal for him. It would be for any teenager. The question was, which mattered more, his physical health or his mental well-being? "Maybe you should stay, huh?" She was cut off by the smell of burning food. "Oh, the sausage!" By the time she turned off the stove and the smoke had cleared, Danny's face had taken on more color. He looked more awake than he had a few minutes before. "Were those in the fridge before you cooked them?" he asked, nose crinkling slightly. "No, actually. We were out, so I got them this morning." She didn't mention how it was an impulse decision, and that she'd left the house at 5 a.m. to clear her head. Her answer seemed to assuage his worries, and he took a few hesitant bites as his sister stomped down the stairs loudly. She was in no way a morning person. Jazz blinked blearily at Maddie as she attempted to scrape the burned sausage from the pan. "Mom, are you cooking breakfast?" she asked incredulously. Maddie tried to hide the way she winced at that. Her kids shouldn't be surprised their mother was doing something as simple as cooking for them. "Of course, it's Danny's first day of high school. I wanted to make you both something special." She tried to keep her tone chipper as her mind berated her. There wasn't anything special about a mom baking burnt eggs and sausage for her children. That was a normal thing to do. Expected, even. "Right," Jazz intoned, voice bland. "It's not going to eat us, is it?" Maddie cringed. "No, I bought the food this morning." "Okay." Maddie went back to scrubbing the pan, periodically glancing at Danny. Her worries calmed somewhat, when every time she saw him, he looked slightly more relaxed. The painkillers must be kicking in. Maddie took a deep breath and willed her voice to sound happy. "Do you have everything ready for school, Danny?" she asked. Danny blinked a few times before his eyes focused on her. I think so. I have my backpack packed, and I'm just going to wear this." He gestured to his hoodie and sweatpants combo. Maddie nodded along. "All right, what about you, Jazz? Do you have everything you need?" Jazz almost looked startled at being addressed. "Me? Yeah, I've got everything." I bought all mine and Danny's supplies months ago, so we only had to pack them. Maddie should have been the one to shop for supplies. Right, okay. She paused. Do you want me to drive you up to school? No! Both kids yelled at once, no doubt imagining pulling up to high school in a decked-out Ghost Hunter's van. Maddie jumped, dropping the long-since cleaned pan into the sink of soapy water. Oh, okay. She bit her lip. How are you getting to school, then? Danny can't walk that far so soon after... She trailed off. Tucker's dad is dropping us off, Danny said, saving her from finishing her sentence. There was a honk outside the door. That's probably them. Bye, Mom. He grabbed his backpack off his chair and headed for the door with Jazz. Wait, here. She grabbed the 2 pill bottles off the counter. Give these to the nurse. You take them at 11 and then again at 2. And make sure you put them back in the medicine cabinet when you get home, okay? He took the offered bottles and zipped them into the smaller pocket of his backpack. "'Kay." And with that, Maddie's only 2 children left her standing alone in the house meant for 4. She stayed, standing in the silence for a few minutes, before opening the basement door and walking back down to the lab. "Danny!" Sam shouted, barreling into him outside the school gates. He let out an uncomfortable sound, and Tucker was quick to pull her off. "Whoa, Sam, the guy almost died. Give him some space, will you?" Sorry, I didn't hurt you, right?" she asked, more worried than she had any business being. Like, ever. Sam didn't get worried. "I'm fine. It's not like I'll die from a hug." "Probably." "Right, of course." She shuffled her feet awkwardly. Tucker either didn't notice or ignored the strangely tense atmosphere. He launched into an inane and irrelevant story and didn't let up until they were seated in the first class of the day. Danny was thankful for his friend. He could always trust him to act like things were normal. It made him happy to have that moment to breathe, to have just 1 minute where he forgot his body wasn't falling apart at the seams, where he could pretend he hadn't died. How boring. Why is he talking about his dog? No one cares. Danny bristled at the voice. Tucker wasn't... Danny cared. No, you don't. You're not even paying attention to his story. Danny could picture Phantom floating on its back, hands behind its head in a show of nonchalance. It wasn't like that. Danny wasn't paying attention, but not because he didn't care. Tucker knew that. He was just talking to fill the air. He was trying to help Danny feel normal. That's what he appreciated. Sounds stupid. Before Danny could mentally respond, their teacher walked into the room. "Hello, students," a bald man with a bit of a belly said, as he opened the door. He set a few books and folders on his desk and turned to write on the chalkboard. "My name is Mr. Lancer, and I'll be your history teacher. And I'll be your math and social studies teacher as well, because the school is understaffed." He grumbled the last part. "Now, I know you're all freshmen, and this is everyone's first day, but we're already 3 weeks behind on coursework. Open your textbooks to page 11, and we'll get started." Danny, along with everyone else, groaned. This was turning out to be nothing like he expected. Though, to be fair, his only experience of high school was from what he watched on TV, and he'd heard many a time that TV wasn't a reliable source. Still, though, he hoped his high school experience wouldn't be all bad. He jinxed it. Danny had jinxed it, and now his school was under attack. There were screams coming from the direction of the cafeteria. Danny was hiding under his desk, clutching his backpack to his chest with his right arm, as his left spasmed uncontrollably. His heart was beating so fast he wouldn't be surprised if it ripped out of his chest. With a shaking hand, he unzipped the front pocket of his backpack. He hadn't turned in his meds to the nurse. He'd taken them at 11 like he was supposed to, but he didn't think he could wait another hour to take them again. His chest hurt, and he knew his heart was beating too fast. He was going to die. He took the medication. When the bell had rung, signaling lunch, Tucker and Sam had packed up to leave with the rest of the class. Danny, however, had elected to stay behind. He was already feeling tired, and his chest was aching where his dad had bruised it when he made his heart beat again a few nights prior. He needed some time to catch his breath. Of course, being the great friends they were, Tucker and Sam offered to stay with him. He had turned them down, promising he'd follow in a few minutes. Now, he wished he'd taken them up on their offer. There was another scream, and something banged a few classrooms down. Danny clutched his backpack closer. Even still, he felt his heartbeat even out of it, and his muscles relaxed slightly as the pain ebbed away. Phantom had been oddly silent since the start of the chaos. Danny didn't know why. "What's happening?" he asked, voice almost silent in the still room. He didn't know who he was asking, or if he was asking anyone at all. Phantom was silent. Then, "You want to help them, don't you?" "What?" There was another scream, this time closer. What did they think he could do? Danny was already out of breath, and all he'd done was sit in class for a few hours. "You could save them all." Danny swallowed. He lifted his arm to stare at the scar creeping down from his palm. It spasmed and fell back down. "How?" Phantom's voice curled with glee. "Leave everything to me." Sam didn't know what to do. There was something raging around the cafeteria, throwing tables and screaming. Its voice was loud and shrill, but no matter how hard she tried, Sam couldn't make out the words. They sounded garbled, like static on an old TV made when you stood too close. She didn't know how long she'd been there, crouched frozen behind an overturned table. Tucker was beside her, her arm clutched in his death grip. She could smell iron, and from the corner of her vision, she could partially make out a severed hand. She didn't know whose it was. She couldn't make herself check. She could see the cafeteria doors from where she sat, but no matter how hard she willed her body to move, it wouldn't obey. She was almost glad. She had seen what happened to the last kid who tried. She was beginning to think it was only a matter of time before she was next, when the doors burst open, and none other than the freaking Fentons burst in like angels sent from heaven. They were decked out in their ridiculous ghost-hunting gear, but it didn't feel quite so ridiculous now. It felt more like salvation. Maddie aimed the gun resting on her shoulder and fired, as Jack set up some kind of clear barricade. It looked like a tarp when he unfolded it, and Sam was worried it wouldn't hold, and she would have to explain to her best friend how his parents were ripped apart trying to defend them. But somehow it did. The entity, rushed at them and swiped at the tarp. Instead of slashing through it, and the scientists stationed behind, the claw passed harmlessly through. The entity pulled back to stare at its appendage. The parts that had passed through were clear of the blood splattered across the rest of its body, displaying an almost translucent green underneath. It looked back up at the tarp. One side was dripping red. If the thing had a face, Sam assumed it would have looked confused. Maddie fired, shooting a hole clear through the entity's chest, and any semblance of peace from its confusion was shattered. It raged again, slashing out at anything and everything in reach. There was a crash from the other side of the room, and Sam whipped her head around to see another entity, the same color as the first's unbloodied hand, except this one seemed more real, corporal. Sam could make out the body, and its face had discernible features. Sam could see confusion written across its furrowed brows as it looked around at the rubble strewn around where it had just smashed a hole through the wall, almost as if it expected it would merely pass through it. Then its face twisted into a sharp grin, and it shot off toward the first entity. It grabbed the other's neck and squeezed. Sam assumed it was trying to choke it, but it instead used its hands to rip the other's body in half. As soon as it did, the two halves seeped through its fingers like goo, splattering across the dirty linoleum floor in a mixture of green goop and human flesh that had been stuck to it. There was a beat where no one moved, then it locked eyes on the Fentons. It seemed to war with itself over whether it should attack them too or run away. Maddie raised her gun to shoot. The entity, who suddenly looked so similar to a child it made Sam pause, held their hands out and waved them around. "Wait, don't shoot," it said. Its voice was crackly, like the first's had been, but unlike the first, Sam could understand the words. Maddie hesitated. "I was just trying to help." Jack stepped forward this time. "Who are you, and why are you attacking the school, ghost?" he said harshly. Sam paused. Ghost? The entity, ghost, seemed just as surprised as Sam was at being called that. It stepped back and started to deny, "I'm not a..." It stopped and turned its head slightly, as if it was listening to a voice none of them could hear. "Oh," it said quietly. "I guess you could call me Phantom then, and I didn't attack the school," it denied. Maddie shot. Phantom narrowly dodged, letting out a distorted yell before it disappeared as if it was never there. This concludes Chapter 4 of Danny and the Phantom. I hope you guys liked this. I got a sudden, inspiration to continue writing, and now we're at 6 of 10 chapters, I think. And yeah, I have it sort of planned out. It's not as detailed of a plan as I have for the Second Life of the Guardian, but I am pretty invested in this story, and I hope you guys like it. Hopefully the next chapter will be up soon, and thank you so much for listening.